Well, it's time now for perspective. On the campaign trail, President-elect Joe Biden said climate change was the number one issue, and his plan to move away from carbon while creating millions of jobs in clean energy has won him legions of younger supporters in particular. It's a policy stance that owes a considerable amount to the Sunrise Movement, a progressive youth-led climate movement that became a vocal backer of Biden in the months that led up to his victory. The question now, how's the movement going to make sure Biden sticks to his word? Well, my guest today is John Paul Mejia, spokesperson for the Sunrise Movement. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us today on France 24. I apologise if I mispronounced your name there. I feel that I may have done. We do know, of course, that the climate crisis has become central to any government. Movements like yours were crucial in getting Biden to the White House. We know that now. What made you first get involved in climate activism?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on. I am from Miami, a frontline community that is already feeling the effects of a changing climate brutally. And the truth is, we have no time to waste. We need bold action that meets the scope of the crisis because people are suffering, frankly, already. So that's what galvanized me to get involved, really. There are people in my community who are suffering, and there's a need to help.
Now, when the Democratic primaries were underway, the Sunrise Movement reached out to the Biden campaign specifically. Why did you reach out, and what was your message?
The primaries were really a time for political engagement for our movement and building our power as progressive young people. We, of course, endorsed Bernie Sanders at first, but having him drop out of the race was really a waking moment for us that tested how we were going to wield power under a Biden administration. So reaching out to Biden was crucial for us to assert our power. So we knew that his first plan was really mediocre and didn't meet the full scope of what the crisis needs us to act with. So we made sure that we had a voice in his campaign and actually completely redesigned his climate plan, which became much more progressive and met the scope of the crisis to what it is now, and actually surged his popularity amongst young voters and voters of color who agreed that climate was a number one priority for them. So going forward with all the promises that he made and the mandate that he was elected on, we're holding him accountable to make sure that he fulfills the promises that he ran on.
And were you in any way surprised at how receptive the Biden campaign was to what you were saying?
To be honest, I don't think so, because it was the reasonable choice to make. Young people this year in this election cycle have been very vocal about what they're scared about, and it's our futures on the line. So if a Biden administration, if a Biden candidacy was to ignore all of those voices that were pleading for action, the results of this election could have been way different. So it was definitely a rallying call that young people forged for the Biden candidacy that was thankfully listened to on the campaign trail. Now we're making sure that it is met at the administration level.
And the crucial question, how exactly are you going to do that? How are you going to hold the Biden administration to account here?
So it begins with personnel appointments, right? We have this crucial process undergoing right now in which Biden has to make choices based on who is going to run this country and who is going to bring a new economy and a new transformed United States to lead the world against the fight on the climate crisis. And we're going to need a cabinet and personnel appointments that embody the scope of the crisis at hand, and folks who have the ambition to actually enact the policy that we need. So under Trump, these past 4 years, fossil fuel executives have ran Washington, and that has to end. Biden can't be Mitch McConnell's vice president. He has to enact bold solutions by making a clean break and appointing a cabinet that is ready to act with the urgency that the climate crisis demands, and one that is free of fossil fuel executives.
So what then did you make of the appointment of John Kerry as Biden's environment czar, shall we say?
It's definitely a start. We know that we have worked with, our movement has worked with John Kerry in the past. Um, the way that we actually revolutionized Biden's climate plan was by a series of task forces that he put together with former presidential candidate and Senator Bernie Sanders. And on this task force, specifically addressing climate, we chose to nominate some folks from our movement, our executive director, Varshni Prakash, along with folks that Biden nominated, including current climate czar, John Kerry. So we're making sure that he really understands the scope of what is necessary. But furthermore, we're asking for a position beyond the one that John Kerry has right now. If Biden really wants to enact solutions that meet the scope of the crisis, a designated cabinet position and Office of Climate Mobilization needs to be established. And that's what our movement is fighting for.
And what do you think are possibly the weaker elements of Biden's policy regarding the environment? Where do you think he may be most likely to backtrack, if indeed he does?
I think that honestly, right now, it has everything to do with personnel. Personnel on an administration influences where it's going to go. And we really cannot afford, and the planet cannot sustain, to have folks who are tied to the fossil fuel industry leading this cabinet. So Biden really has to inform himself well by surrounding himself with folks who embody the ambition that the climate movement needs right now. And we're expecting him to nominate strong movement allies who are ready to fight the climate crisis at its full scope. To be put on his cabinet. So that's definitely something that we're looking out for and pressuring for. And we don't want him to lack or go behind on all of his promises in that way.
And who exactly would these allies be?
So yeah, specifically right now, we're pushing for Biden to appoint Congresswoman Deb Haaland as Secretary of the Interior to make sure that we usher in a responsible leader to take care of our public lands and not sell them away to oil and gas companies. And we're also pushing for Dr. Mustafa Ali to head the EPA. We know that these are both figures that embody the essence of what environmental justice is by both appointing someone, Deb Haaland, who can sort of usher in this new age of indigenous sovereignty over the climate movement and literally have an indigenous voice at the federal level, and Dr. Mustafa Ali, who has been a staunch movement ally from the start and actually began his career organizing as young people have throughout history.
Now, of course, we know that the Senate is still to play for in Georgia. Biden might have a very hard time getting environmental policies through a Republican-controlled Senate. How concerned are you about that?
Wow. I mean, the stakes of the Georgia runoff election really could not be higher. We could flip control of the Senate, which is going to make the difference between passing Biden's $2 trillion Build Back Better plan, funding economic relief and creating millions of good jobs to stop climate change, or not, right? And we are working heavily with voters and organizations on the ground in Georgia that can really usher in that vote to get those candidates. But let's say that doesn't happen and we remain with a Republican-controlled Senate. What's the plan then? Well, we know that Biden was elected on a mandate to act, and he has to use every toolbox that he can in his executive power to get that done. So that starts mostly with executive orders that do a variety of things to really stop what the past 4 years and really much before that have been detrimentous to our climate too.
And do you think Biden has the full support of the Democratic Party behind him?
I think that there are still factional differences in the Democratic Party versus who represents people versus who represents corporations. And we're really honing in on that progressive mandate that Biden was elected on to listen to the voices of the Democratic Party who represent people over profit margins. And we're going to make sure that that voice continues to be the loudest within the Democratic Party and work over the next few years to make sure that that soon becomes the dominant voice of the Democratic Party that will rally behind a Democratic president.
John Paul Mejia, I'm so sorry, we're going to have to leave it there, and I hope I did pronounce your name slightly better that time round. A spokesperson for the Sunrise Movement, John Paul Mejia, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.